Mackinder's pivot and its contemporary relevance, case of India and China, the role of India and China.
So my topic is Mackinder's pivot and its contemporary relevance, the role of India and China. So Mackinder's heartland theory, which engages geography with the international politics, dates back to over a century, but still in the 21st century international politics, we can say that it is still relevant when you consider especially the role of China and India in international politics. And his doctrine suggests, as you all know, that the geopolitical actors that dominated the heartland would possess the necessary geopolitical and economic potential to eventually control the whole world island, which he envisioned was the land mass of Eurasia and Africa combined. And eventually they will also come to control the whole world. So that is basically his theory, and I am looking into how this heartland theory of Mackinder holds relevance for both India and China in terms of engagement with Central Asia in the present century. Now, I would just like to start with this particular map which depicts Mackinder's heartland. As you can see, the highlighted area, which is the pivot area, occupies almost half of the continent, and also not the inner or the marginal crescent, which was depicted by Mackinder. And very notably, this included both India and China. And he said that the control over the marginal crescent is also very important for controlling the pivot area. So in this context also, the role of China and India was clearly recognized by Mackinder. So coming on to the major tenets of what was Mackinder's heartland as envisioned by Mackinder, he included the river basins of Volga, Yenisei, Amu Darya, Sir Darya, and the two seas, the Caspian and the Aral. And he based his argument on the major strength that Central Asia had at that point of time. That is, it had sufficient natural resources, and it also had sufficient connectivity, because that time the transcontinental railway was emerging, and there was sufficient connectivity through the railways, and also it was protected from invasions, because it was there was the ICCs on the one side, and also it was landlocked on the other. So it was, he argued that it was potentially protected from the invasions, which again we have to consider in the current geopolitical conditions, but again this was an argument given by him. And the last one was the ability to sustain large populations, which again can be attributed to the sufficient natural resources which was possessed by the region. Now coming on to the major tenets which he said in his heartland theory, he said that control of the Eastern Europe is vital to the control of the world, and his main tenet was that who rules the Eastern Europe commands the heartland, who rules the heartland commands the world island, and who rules the world island commands the world. And he said this based on the facts that this particular area or Eurasia, it controlled well over 50% of the world's resources. Its size and the central position made it key to the control of the world islands. And also it was, as I said earlier, it's protected from the sea power by ice to the north and the mountains and the deserts to the south. So this is a very important point to consider when we discuss this topic, because he said he propounded three ways, or what three major powers can have a control over this heartland and eventually thus have a control over the world. So these were the three major powers which could have a control over, they potentially have a control over the heartland. It is, first one is a successful invasion of Russia by a Western European nation, and he gave most probability to Germany at that point of time. And second and the most important was the conquest of Russia by a Sino-Japanese empire, and the third was a Russo-German alliance. So here notably he recognized the potential of China at that point of time to have a global dominance, and he also stressed on the relevance of power, which is again important in today's geopolitical context, because just in spite of having maritime growth also, both China and India are also focusing on their continental power also. So this particular reference to the relevance of land power is again important in the current geopolitical context. So yeah, this is a map of Spikeman's Rimland theory, which again depicted the importance of both India and China, which was again based on the human resources and so on. Now let us examine what is Mackinder's pivot area today. So today's pivot area would include Russia and the former Soviet republics of Central Asia, that's Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, which is marked by the Caspian Basin. And we'll also, it will be also prudent on our part to just examine whether this Central Asian region has the inherent strengths to be a locus of the locus for the major powers to concentrate. So when we see this, mainly the natural resources, when we see Central Asia still holds a very large amount of natural resources, and the Caspian energy reserves are considered to be some of the largest and the most valuable in the world. And the estimates vary between 50 to 110 billion barrels of oil and from 170 to 463 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. And also is a strategic location, their central location in the continent, and they also border with China, Russia, one of the most important powers in the world, and also Afghanistan, which is again gaining sufficient strategic position in the global strategy of most of the powers. And also important is China as Mackinders' envisionment of China as a contestant, and today's argument of rising China. And now coming on to China's policy towards Central Asia, or what is called the Look West policy of China. The major driving factors has been the geopolitical vacuum which had incurred in Central Asia after the disintegration of the Soviet Union. And soon after that, the Central Asian states also opened up to trade, which again allowed China to have sufficient hold over the Central Asian regions and to engage with these nations in terms of trade and transnational engagement. Now, the third was the stability provided by the US and the Russian presence. So you can see that one cannot always argue that the role of other extra-regional powers in Central Asia has been not beneficial to China's presence. But rather than that, the stability that the US and Russian presence provided was sufficiently significant for China, because it could then operate under this in a silent manner and grow its power and influence in Central Asia. And also important was a Great Western Developmental Strategy which it undertook in Xinjiang, which is a resisted area in the western region of China. And this Great Western Development Strategy was an economic strategy which was adopted by the PRC. And here they tried to economically upgrade the Xinjiang region so that they can eventually be integrated into the proper China. So for this great developmental strategy, trade was very important, and so was the border area which the Xinjiang shared with the Central Asian nations. So this particular strategy of China in Xinjiang also was a major driving factor in its policy towards Central Asia. And obviously the geographical proximity of China with Central Asia was another factor. Coming on to China's interest in Central Asia, first is the oil and natural gas, as you all know, is a major factor that figures when China considers its relation with the other nations, especially when China is increasingly trying to diversify its oil and natural gas resources, because it has now realized that relying on only one or two sources like the Middle Eastern oil can make its oil supplies really vulnerable. So it is increasingly trying to diversify its energy sources, and also there is an increasing international pressure on China to cut down on its pollution and increasing pressure to look onto its environmental aspects. So they are increasingly looking forward for cleaner energy, and therefore the Central Asian natural and oil and natural gas resources is very important in determining its policy towards Central Asia. And the second one would be securing the western borders, as I already said, regarding Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, which is again seeking to separate away from China. So there has been sufficient Islamist fundamentalism which has been transcending the borders of Central Asia to Xinjiang, and to prevent this figures primarily in the agenda of China. And the third is trade and economy. China sees Central Asia not only as a bordering region, but also a region through which it can transcend to other regions like Middle East or for Afghanistan or Iran to facilitate its trade relationships. So in case of trade and economy also, China sees Central Asia as trying in this strategy. And the Chinese volume of trade between 2002 and 2008 has tripled over the years. So when you see trade and economy of China related to India, they've gone a long way in achieving a very stable economic and trade relation with these countries. And now again, the strategic reach which China can acquire through its presence in Central Asia is another area of interest for China to have a very stable presence in Central Asia, and it is not only a gateway for China to the Middle East, but also to the West as well. And the strategy which China has been following has been very unique from that of the other countries in Central Asia. It has been providing vital non-Russian transport routes and oil pipelines. And in this area, in this particular area, you can note that India has not been sufficiently successful in having a stable transportation of the oil. And though it has some projects, it has not been progressing very well. But in the case of China, you can see that they have been increasingly assisting the Central Asian nations, even in terms of railways or providing, bringing the inner landlocked regions of Central Asia into increasing global reach. And next is the confrontational stand towards the major powers. As you can see, China has not been adopting the rule of a resistive power, so that it might invite the wrath of the other major powers, but rather it has been adopting a certain, it has been adapting with the other powers. It doesn't really go for a conflict with the other major powers in the region, but then really grow under the umbrella which exists. So that non-confrontational strategy which China has been
accommodation of interest or accommodation of interest.
Yes, it doesn't really go for a conflict with the other major powers in the region. So that has also been a major factor that figures in the strategy of China towards Central Asia. And next is the role of regional stabilizer, of course, because the stability of Central Asia or Afghanistan also figures for the stability of China. Next is the role of SCO as a platform to interact with the Central Asian regional states. And China in this case has been using Shanghai Cooperation Organization and also its predecessor as a major instrument to further its interests. Because
Shanghai 5.
Shanghai 5 it has been using because it has been using to solve the major border disputes which it had with Russia and also Central Asia. And after it was solved, in 2001 when the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was formed, it was shaped according to the strategic needs of China at this point of time to deal with the so-called three evils of separatism, extremism, and terrorism. So using of SCO as a platform to interact with the Central Asian states. Now, looking into what is India's Central Asian policy or what is called the Connect Central Asia policy, the growth in Indian economy and the reliance of energy imports, much like China here, India's interest coincides with that of the China because it has also been, its economy has also been showing a considerably sustained growth, and it has been increasingly relying on the energy imports, and this has made the energy-rich Central Asia significant in the strategy of India. And India and Central Asia share common concerns with terrorism, extremism, and drug trafficking. And it has also been marked by significant bilateral visits on both the sides. And India plans to further its strength in strategic and security cooperation with all the Central Asian regions, with a special focus on military training, joint research, counter-terrorism coordination, and close consultation on Afghanistan within the framework of its Connect Central Asia policy. Now coming on to what is India's major interest in Central Asia, again the strategic relevance of the region and the central position which Central Asia occupies and the strategic reach that a country can have by having a dominance in the region is a major interest of India. And again expanding the economic opportunities abroad because presently India has relatively poor economic relations in Central Asia, but then after declaring the Connect Central Asia policy, it has been increasingly looking forward to strengthen its presence and strengthen its trade and economic engagement with the region. And next is the energy needs, especially India has been reliant on the Kazakhstan oil and the Turkmenistan's gas reserves. And next is the arc of instability, which some argue extends from the Fergana Valley of Central Asia till India, and the shared concerns on terrorism and drug trafficking has been another matter which concerns India and induces its engagement in Central Asia. Now, coming on to the engagement of India with each of the Central Asian nations. In terms of Kazakhstan, its strategic location has been of interest to India, and the untapped energy and mineral wealth, vast tracts of land available for large-scale commercial farming.
Untapped by India. China has already tapped it.
Yes. Yeah, untapped by India. And coming on to Tajikistan, its strategic location because it borders with Afghanistan, China, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and it also has a close proximity to Pakistan. And Uzbekistan, India has history cultural ties with Uzbekistan, and Indian participation in the development of its energy sector is also particularly important, especially in the natural gas sector. India has sufficient ties with Uzbekistan in the current context, like the Karakkal gas situations you have mentioned here. And then the joint exercises between the two armed forces, that of India and Uzbekistan, has also been considered.
That too is not accepted. The right thing to do.
That has also seen sufficient progress over the years. Now, in terms of Kyrgyzstan, mining, agriculture, IT, hydropower, and pharmaceutical sectors, besides boosting cultural and educational ties, has been a major factor of the ties between India and Kyrgyzstan. So, yeah, you can also note that the pharmaceutical sector in this sector, India has been active in all these roles in developing nations. And the Defense Research and Development Organization's Mountain Biomedical Research Center is an ambitious joint project which India has had with Kyrgyzstan. Coming on to Turkmenistan, India has immense opportunities for establishing a strong tie in case of transfer of natural gas. But then somehow it has not been maturing into a very good relation. The Tati pipeline, which is under the plans, but then it has not really become instrumental. It is still elusive and it has the potential to connect Central and South Asia more tightly. But then this has again to be seen how best India can put this into real practice. Now, despite the opportunities in the energy and the trade sectors, the Indo-Turkmenistan relations underperformed. Turkmenistan had also called on India to invest in its chemical, mining, textile, and pharmaceutical and telecommunications industries. So it has several opportunities. It's just that India has to go out there and engage with these nations. And hopefully, in 2012 they have declared this Connect Central Asia policy, through which it will be able to go into these countries and avail the immense opportunities which lies out there. So the next North-South Transport Corridor, or the NSTC, which India has reactivated, it bypasses India's dependence on Pakistan to link up with Central Asia, which becomes very important because most of the pipeline projects which India was supposed to have from Central Asia passes through Pakistan, and because of the instability which is going on, it most of the time it does not get it does not fructify itself. So a bypass is always good for India's relation with Central Asia, which does not pass through Pakistan. Now, comparing China's and India's positions in Central Asia, whether it's cooperation or competition, first of all, there is a common need for both China and India to create a regional stability, because the stability of Central Asia, or for that matter Afghanistan, will always be in the interest of India. And now, evolving cooperation in the energy sector is a notable feature which has been featuring in the Sino-Indian relations, because in the energy sector, most of the times, even in terms of bidding and all, often India is seen to lose out to China, and also the bidding prices goes up and up each time they compete with each other. But rather, when they have a joint bidding, the prices also seem to have a limit, and they also, both the countries gain from this type of an engagement. So this has really, China and India both have agreed upon cooperation in the energy sector. And then the position in SEO, when we see the position of India and China's stand towards the position of India in SEO, we can see that China has not been very receptive of India's stand. But when we compare it to Russia and other nations, and also India has not been able to go beyond the power of an observer status in